Well, I have to do something now that everything I watch is on hiatus. And since 90% of my content so far is Steven Universe, I think I might try to diversify a little bit. So it's about time we got a definitive answer on something very near and dear to my heart. Welcome back to another One True Theory, everybody, where today we're going to be talking about the best boy from Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Marco Diaz. And by the way, that is boy as in B-O-I, because sometimes you can start using something ironically, but then it becomes a part of your everyday vernacular, and you have to start thinking about your life and what it's become. But this theory isn't about me. It's about Marco Diaz from Star vs. the Forces of Evil, a residential safety kid, rebel princess, squire to the acting queen, among other things. Like the rest of our principal cast of characters, Marco has been growing and developing dynamically through the past 3 seasons, and since Season 3 has just recently ended, and we are looking at a significant hiatus while Star vs. the Forces of Evil moves over from Disney XD to regular old Disney Channel, I think it's time to answer the question, how strong is Marco Diaz really? I ask this question because over the course of the series we have seen him do some pretty above average stuff for a human. But just how superhuman is it? Is it even really that superhuman? And that is why today we are going to look at some of Marco Diaz's greatest feats, and to the best of our abilities we're going to see just how super the magical Princess of Mewni's best friend really is. There are 3 feats in particular that are of interest when trying to decide how super safety kid Marco Diaz is. And they are all pulled from Season 3, because it's the most recent source of canon, and they're the most impressive feats. What'll you do? These 3 feats are as follows. Marco Diaz punching through Toffee and then getting hurtled into a boulder in the aptly named episode Toffee. Marco lifting Star in the photo booth seat effortlessly in Booth Buddies, and Marco and Star's fight in the penultimate episode, Divide. We will start this off by looking at the seemingly least impressive of these feats, and that is Marco lifting up Star effortlessly while she is sitting on the bench in Booth Buddies. Now this seems like a very mundane thing to focus on, but the only real reason it's on this list is because Marco seemed to pull this feat off effortlessly. So let's figure it out. Star Butterfly in canon is 5 feet 2 inches tall, as stated in the upcoming book Star vs. the Forces of Evil, The Magic Book of Spells, which is set to release September 11th of this year, by the way. Now, with all this info, it will be pretty easy to determine Star's weight, since we can just use the average weight of a 15-year-old girl, since I'm fairly certain humans are just humans in the first place. But that's a theory for another time. So estimating Star's weight, we get that she's about 115 pounds, which is about the average for a 15-year-old who is just shy of 5'3", which is where Star's at. After all of that, we have to figure out how much Marco weighs, which on average for a 15-year-old boy is about 125 pounds, but since Marco was described as slender, let's go ahead and say he's a few pounds shy of the average at 120. Him lifting Star up right here while she is on the bench means he is lifting approximately 90% of his body weight, which isn't so impressive until you consider a few additional factors. He is only using one arm to lift her up. Star is actually making it more difficult for him to do this by sitting right on the edge of the seat, which is keeping all the force on Marco as he is lifting. If she would have sat in a crevice, then Marco would have essentially been lifting nothing, but this is not the case. Marco isn't even exerting that much energy or trying all that hard to lift her. Just using his second arm to distribute the weight and pressure, Marco could lift easily double Star's weight at 230 pounds, and if Marco actually tried, then that number could undoubtedly jump up to some bigger heights. And all of this being done by a 15-year-old boy, especially with Marco's build, is incredible, and borderline superhuman. Next, we have punching through Toffee. Now, the number to punch through a human's chest is not really easily accessible information, and there are a ton of factors to consider, such as where someone is punched, how fast, how much force is in the punch, etc, etc. Toffee is also technically a lizard, but since he is largely humanoid in shape, I went ahead and gave him a human-like skeletal organ structure for these numbers and calculations. The next thing to consider is what bones Marco would have to go through in order to make it to the other side. This is fortunate because Marco enters in from the back just left of the spine and comes out just right of the sternum, and fortunately passes by Toffee's shoulder bone, right underneath it. So with just the ribs to get through, what does that require? Marco in this act is basically trying to impale Toffee with his fist. And as an interesting little tidbit, there are actually two classifications of impalement. Type 1 where a moving human meets an immobile object, and Type 2 where a moving object meets an immobile human. This case would be Type 2. So to simply crack ribs, you need about 3,300 newtons of force. But the problem here is you aren't aiming just to crack ribs. You want to go straight through the body. Ribs, flesh, suit and all. This would mean Marco would have to deliver a punch of thousands of newtons of force plus in order to achieve the desired result of punching through Toffee. And this number is only further increased by the fact that Marco has to compensate for the large surface area of his fist as compared to the much smaller surface area of, say, like a bullet or a knife. We'll come back to this feat more in a little bit, but for now we're going to focus on not even 10 seconds later when we get a pretty reasonable assertion of Marco's durability. Marco is thrown against a nearby boulder's worth of rubble and cracks the rock on impact, which definitely means it was a pretty decent blow to take. But how severe is it? Well, that's why we needed his weight from before, because with his weight we can acquire his mass, which is about 54.55 kilograms. From this we need to determine Marco's acceleration as he's flying towards the boulder, which means we need to try to measure how far he is from the boulder in question. We can do this thanks to Queen Moon. Moon is forced into the ground by Toffee not long after he throws Marco, leaving a sizable marking into the ground. The trench looks like it could fit Moon and a whole extra head with no trouble. So how tall is Queen Moon? Comparing her to her daughter, whom is officially 5'2", and comparing their heights, it would seem Moon is roughly 5 inches taller than her daughter, putting her at around 5'7". The hole that Moon is in here is taller still, which makes it roughly about 6 feet. Considering this trench's length, where Marco was in position to the two when he punched Toffee, and the additional space between where Moon is left stuck and where the boulder actually is, it's reasonable to assume that Marco was thrown an approximate distance of 5.49 meters. And to be thrown this distance, it took Marco about a quarter of a second to hit the wall, which means his total acceleration comes to 21.96 meters per second, or 49 miles an hour. And when you input this acceleration to figure out the impact of his crash by plugging in the numbers, we have to figure out the change in acceleration upon hitting the wall. And we are left with negative 87.84 meters per second. The negative only means a deceleration occurred. Now we use the classic force formula to determine the rest. We multiply our mass by our latest acceleration calculation to find Marco hit the boulder with a force of 4,791 newtons. That's enough force to easily break someone's femur, which is the strongest bone in the body, and it is plenty of force to break those shoulder blades, fracture his spine or his skull, and even rupture organs. But Marco seems only down for a minute at the most before he's right back up as if nothing happened. This means he can easily take just as much, if not slightly more punishment than this right off the bat. So we know Marco's definitely abnormally strong and durable. Where does his speed come into play? Marco, in the penultimate episode of Season 3, Divide, was able to successfully outmaneuver and counter all of Star's magic. He even blocked a succession of lasers from Spider with a top hat. Now, these lasers are coming out of a minigun and do seem to have shell casings, so for this purpose we'll treat them as bullets to determine their speed. Bullets, on average, fire at a rate of 2,500 feet per second, which is around 1,700 miles per hour. Now we use Star's cannon height of 5'2" to analyze how far away they are from each other and get a meager 23.25 feet. So this means Marco blocked a very conservative estimate of 50 lasers going at a minimum of 1,700 miles per hour, putting Marco's reaction time and speed at insane levels. Put it into perspective, consider this. In order to dodge a bullet from 500 feet away, a person would need to react to the sound of the gunshot in 0.2 seconds. This is about twice as fast as Olympic sprinters. As we said, Marco is 23 feet away from Star, and he is being shot at by Spider, which, if we put this in scope of the earlier example, means they are losing nearly 96% of the distance needed to successfully dodge a bullet. In turn, this obviously means that the time to react will also be smaller. Considering all of this, that means Marco has a reaction time of 0.0093 seconds, which makes his reaction time over 20 times greater than your fastest Olympic sprinter. And even more to the point, he didn't just block one shot. He blocked a conservative estimate of 50. meaning that this wasn't some fluke feat or accomplishment. Going back to the Toffee feat, now that we have this information, means that Marco was able to exert the amount of force he needed to impale Toffee, not through strength alone, but through speed as well. He compensated for his lack of enough physical strength and large striking surface area by being fast and precise with his blows. This just goes to show that our boy Marco has cultivated an unbelievable physical ability during his time in other dimensions. Whereas his strength might not be where it once was, albeit still very impressive, his speed is still off the charts. So let's tally up Marco Diaz as he is at the end of Season 3. Strength-wise, he can comfortably lift 2.5 times his body weight, in a max which isn't fully defined but can be estimated around 4 times. He can shake off bone-shattering injuries with ease and function perfectly normally afterwards. And his reactions and speed are many times greater than that of Olympic athletes. All of this, and he isn't even at his strongest. Though it's good Marco is as impressive as he is, because he's going to need it with a clips of cooking up something fishy at the end of Season 3. And those are my thoughts. So until next time everybody, remember, every video is a party, and you're all invited to the next one. Hey, if this video suited your fancy, then be sure to give this video a like to show your love and appreciation. And please, subscribe to the channel for more awesome content. Leave a comment below as I will surely read it, and be sure to follow the social medias so you can stay updated on all the channel's content. Thank you for watching everybody. Keep enjoying, and I hope to see you all at the next party.